I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Join me today as I talk to Kevin Miller, who's organizing the Healthy Church Growth Conference in Boston, Massachusetts, this April 2026. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. I'm here with Kevin Miller, and I'm here to talk to him about
the Church Builders Conference.
Church Builders Conference.
Yeah, that's not the title. That's just what it is. It's a Church Builders Conference.
Great. Now, Kevin, first of all, thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah.
And you're on my program probably a couple of years ago at the last Small Church Leadership Conference.
Yeah.
Why'd you get interested in having your own conference?
Well, what a great question. I probably got interested in having a conference that was going to be focused on spreading the gospel. Something that it was probably not so much that it had to be my own conference or something like that. And I don't actually think that it is our own conference. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I wanted to have a conference that was about church growth, that was about the spread of the gospel. And that's not the only thing in the Bible that's important.
Right.
But it seems like it's just something we haven't talked a lot about recently. And it's such an encouraging thing. That was kind of what became the passion. Can we get a conference on
growth?
Okay.
I'm on board immediately. When I hear something like that, I mean, that's why we wanted to do the Small Church Conference back in 2019, helping people to grow. I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast too, is to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. It's kind of funny though. There's a certain segment, I think, of Christianity, at least, where there's people who are nervous about that topic of growth. What's your take on that?
I don't have a lot of takes on it. I think, depending on what room I'm in, different people might feel different things about my answer, or I might think differently about it. I actually think I really am passionate about memorizing scripture. So this last year I memorized 1 Corinthians chapter 3, which is, among the things, and it just helps me in mentees. But 1 Corinthians 3 is about growth. It's about Paul saying I'm a waterer and I'm a planter, and God makes it grow, and all these kind of things. And that's why I started to memorize it, just because I wanted, even in preparation for the conference. But it's interesting that the beginning of the chapter and the end of the chapter, which is kind of about what church leadership looks like and growing churches, and even that we'll be judged by how successful we are in some of this, even though it's this awesome thing. It's this awesome dynamic description of Paul's thinking about these things. But it begins and it ends with Paul kind of correcting the Corinthians on them getting off on their perspective about the role of leadership, the importance of leadership, jealousy, backbiting, competing, no more boasting about leaders, all these things. And so what's my perspective about why it's complicated to talk about growth? I think probably because in our younger years as a movement, when we really were focused on that,
right,
we also were probably immature in the way we talked about it and treated each other. Not everybody, not everywhere, but you hear stories that make you cringe about the way that this was approached and the harshness, the sins, the competitiveness, those kinds of things that we've all probably been, anybody that's been around for a while, been a part of those things, probably been sinned against and sinned against others in those same fashions. So why do I think it's difficult to talk about it? Because I think there are people that react because they had bad experiences, but I still think it's such a biblical and awesome concept. And I think one of the reasons that we've been able, the Boston church, it maybe is not the oldest church in our movement, although it's right up there. And there's no way for us to move forward if we don't hear the negative experiences that people have had and be able to understand and have compassion for them, but then also help people have new experiences so that they can engage and find success in these areas that God does want us to, to go at it with all of our hearts, which growth is one of them. The spreading of the gospel, the being a disciple, the making disciples. If this can be done in a good and encouraging and victorious kind of way. But I think that's why it gets complicated to talk about these things, because there are some legitimately bad things, but then there's also some reality to God's calling us to this. How do we put those things together and move forward?
Right. That's a great point. That's why I like the idea of having it here in Boston. As a young Christian, we flew to Boston from the Bay Area to go to the Evangelism Summit, or what was it, Worldwide Evangelism Seminar.
What year was that?
It had to be 87 or 88.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was God Almighty Reigns, and Kip did a lesson on They Hated the Dreamer. I can't remember. It was incredible. Is it the Boston Garden? It was just the most exciting thing in the world. So many good memories from that time period. And I just love it. I think
That's awesome.
I think it's fantastic. And that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in coming to Boston 6 months ago. Is what I find interesting is this church is as old or older than most in our family of churches, 50 years old, coming up on 50 years old, a lot of older Christians in it, and yet it's experiencing revival. It's growing. And like I think you mentioned 314 baptisms last year. That's exciting to me. I think when we talked a couple of years ago in Dallas, I think you're around 2,000 or 2,200, and you had the dream of getting up to 3,000 in 2030.
By 2030.
How's that going? Tell me a little bit about the progress.
Yeah, I would say kind of coming out of COVID, when all things were said and done, I think in January of 2023, we were about 2,170 members, and now about 3 years later, we're creeping up on 2,500 members. So we're not quite we're about 300. And so it's been inspiring. It's been amazing. I've been a part of the Boston church for, in 1987, when you were at that conference, I was 12 years old, and I hadn't discovered Jesus yet, and I hadn't discovered a lot of the sin that I was going to get involved with yet either. But I was going to say, I became a Christian in 95, and then was part of the Boston church in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been a part of the Boston church since 1999. I've been a part of the Boston church for more than 25 years. We've had, seasons where we've grown a little, but then shrunk back down the next year, and grown a bit, and then hit a wall. But so basically, there's been tons of good work done. I don't mean to throw any shade on any of the work that was done in any of those years. But, we've basically been a 2,000 member church, 2,100 members for the better part of 20 years. For me, it just feels like surely if there's a God, and I believe that there is, and that his son is Jesus, but surely if the Bible is true, then the gospel should be able to spread beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've sort of dared to dream in 2021, 2022, as we started thinking about the dreams and the goals of the Boston church, kind of where we were. We were an aging church. Most of our churches are aging. I mean, we were aging and getting up there. We knew if we don't capture the youth,
mm-hmm.
And start to grow, but we believe what could we do to start getting that? And the staff and the eldership and the Boston church really threw themselves into it.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's been a really inspiring, I think 5 years, but the last 3 years, you've really seen the church has started to grow. 3 years ago, grew by 100. 2 years ago, grew by 100 again, grew by 100, converted nearly 300 last year, and we converted 300 this year. So it's been amazing. We've had as many conversions this last year as we have in any moment of recorded history in the Boston church. Now, there was a day when the Boston church was much bigger, but it included like all of the major cities of New England. Like the Boston church included Hartford and all these things. And so that's kind of a funny, we had more conversions then, but just Boston alone, we're seeing God. We had a staff meeting today. You were there, and we always, it was just the staff sharing good news stories from the year. And it's just like miracles.
Right.
And the heroism of the disciples, families coming together. You just hear these things. That's what is just so inspiring to me. And that's partly why I want to host the conference, because we actually think, when I look out and all the brothers and sisters that lead churches that I interface with, I think, most of the people I talk to are amazing people.
Right.
But they're having trouble putting it together.
Yep.
And we haven't really said, let's talk about this. Yeah. It's funny, the team that's putting, I don't want to jump your questions, but there's a team that's putting, the conference together. The team is 20 men and women from all over the world, from Indonesia to Australia to several folks in Africa, all over the U.S. We have elders, Angeles Women's Ministry leaders, young and old. It's a great little group. So they're helping us plan the classes and all that kind of stuff and the speakers. But before that, we were just with the Boston Task Force. It started with the Boston Task Force, just going, what do we call this thing?
Right.
And my own task force went back and forth, on like healthy church growth. Is that going to be too much? Is that going to be too little? If we say growth, is that going to... But that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about, and we actually think it can be done in a healthy way, in a way where young and old, the different gift sets can exist. There can be good unity. This isn't, so that's why we raised our hand to say we should host something like this, or somebody should host something like this. And then it kind of worked into, we really started to see God move, and we felt like we were growing. So we raised our hand to make some phone calls to the Catalyst team and the Evangelist Service team and groups like that to say, how would you guys feel if we hosted a conference like this? And everybody gave their blessing, and there were some questions about it all.
Okay, so is it an ILC? Is this an International Leadership Conference? Is this coupled with like an ICMC? Explain, like, how does it fit into what's been going on up until now?
No, the decision was made, not to make it an ILC. We asked the Catalyst team, would you like this to be an ILC? And they were open to it. I don't know all the way know what's safe to say, and I don't want to divulge it, but it kind of came down to, we probably felt we wanted to host a conference on growth where the creators of it were part of growing situations. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense. We wanted to have a conference where, and that's kind of this task force that we pulled together from all over the world. That's kind of been I mean, we all have good years, we all have bad years. It's not like, but generally speaking, churches that are on the growth track, that are feeling success. We want to host a conference and have the speakers be people that are speaking from a place of inspiration about the topics that they're talking about. And so part of that became, well, maybe that seems like a very specific thing. So why don't you guys have the conference? And the Evangelist Service team and the all the service teams were like, well, let's not call it an ILC, but we'll clear the board of all other conferences so that there's nothing competing with this.
Okay. So the people...
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it does. So the people who are speaking, churches are growing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's speaking?
Well, we actually have a meeting tonight to finalize who is speaking. There are, how about I tell you this? We've got elders and teachers and evangelists and women's ministry leaders, but the four main speakers, I think we're picking out, 4 or 5 main speeches as we think about church growth. I think we're going to have an opening speech that's on healthy church growth. We kind of feel like you can't talk about, how can you really say you're a healthy church if year after year your church does not spread the gospel and it's not growing? And we've also seen examples where maybe people have grown over a year or two, but it maybe wasn't healthy, and then things got shown for what they were. So we kind of feel like to talk about being healthy includes growth, and to talk about growth, you have to include healthy. But the opening speech is probably going to be more on the kind of the healthy side, collaborative leadership and unity that causes growth. And we're going to have Chris Ogbenaya, who's the former lead evangelist for the Lagos, Nigeria church. He's just a great brother and an amazing lion of a speaker. And he's going to kind of speak on, Lagos has a real well-established eldership and teachers ministry and evangelist corps, and they're raising up new evangelists, and the church has grown over years. So he's going to kind of open up the speech. I've been chosen to do the second speech that Friday morning. That's going to be more on growth, and it's going to be kind of oriented that way. And kind of like we're talking about, I think we're seeing a lot of stuff in the Boston church, but that's going to be the growth class. And then there's going to be a youth class and so we're going to have a couple brothers speaking to the brothers. And we've chosen Kyle Plum, who is one of the fiery evangelists for San Diego. He's a campus minister that's seeing just breakthroughs. And then Josephus Bartua, who's a campus minister in Boston, are going to share the stage. And they're going to be preaching the word to the brothers just on that the fact that the next generation is being captured, and it can be captured, but you got to approach it a certain way. They're hitting that in a certain kind of way. And the sisters at that same time are going to be, it's going to be next generation also, but it's going to be a little bit older, younger. And so Melissa, my wife, is going to be speaking with Amber Lefevre, who leads a small church outside of San Antonio, and not Amber Lefevre. Sorry, that was her maiden name. Amber Rodriguez. Okay. So Amber and Esteban lead a small church, and the campus is growing, and the church has been growing. And so the two of them are going to be be sharing the stage, kind of about mentorship and raising up the young, and that'll be the women's class. And then our final class, the Saturday class, is going to be taught by Tony Fernandez, who's leading the Broward Church. Broward is part of the Miami church, but it's kind of functions separately. And he's seeing year over year, last few years. I mean, I think it's like a 600 or 700 person church, and I think in 2025 they grew by 100.
Wow.
And I think they had 100 conversions, which is just like, or I think they had more than 100 conversions. But you can see he's full of faith on this. So those are kind of the four main speeches. And, the classes are going to be formed around that. There's going to be kind of 3 different tracks that all run concurrently. We have 3 different class sections. And in each of them, you're going to have some health classes, things on how to assess ourselves and how to raise up an eldership, an elder and evangelists and teachers working together, and kind of those kind of classes. And then you'll have other classes that are more evangelist growth track. That'll be the work of an evangelist, or how to build momentum, or how you will have youth and family and some different things. And then you'll have just straight youth classes, thriving campus ministries, thriving youth and family ministries, how to inspire, how to create ministries where the young are inspired, how to create ministries where the young are raising their hand up to say, I want to serve. We're going to have some different classes that all kind of run concurrently. We didn't want to put like a whole health track. And then, but if you wanted to go to 2 health classes, you couldn't. And then so we're kind of mixing all those up in 3 different sessions. And we've got guys that are doing great work, going to be speaking, guys and girls doing those classes.
Right. I think that's great. I like the idea of the healthy growth, church growth.
Yeah.
It's a great title, health and growth. It's an issue that we ran into in the small church leadership conference because people tend to polarize. Some people really focus on the growth, and the tension there is like, oh, you're just interested in baptizing people, but you don't care about the health of the disciples or the leaders involved. And then you've got the other who are focused on the health, and they're focused on, feeling close to Jesus, but they're not can be criticized for not being interested in growing the church.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you're including it in one title, because I've always felt like, hey, if you're healthy as a person and as a disciple, you're going to want to grow it. And if you're growing, you got to have health. I mean, it's just got to be together.
It's like I think of the 2 scriptures. One is John chapter 1, and it says Jesus was full of grace and truth.
Right.
And then there's an Ecclesiastes passage that I'm not going to know where the chapter is, but he just talks about the man of God avoids all extremes.
Right.
And I do think Jesus was, he was the perfect mix. He was full.
Yeah.
He was balanced, and he had all of this, and you kind of have to have all of it. I mean, to be the lead minister in the Boston church, which is, 50 years old and filled with 80-year-olds, down to 15-year-olds in the church, we're not going to get the church moving by doing some version of some shortcut 1992. I don't even know what, it's not. And I don't believe in that. I think, my dad's a disciple in one of our New England churches. He's 75 years old, and I baptized him. My brother and I baptized him, 25 years ago after we had become Christians, and my mom too. But I sometimes think about my dad. My dad's 75. But I want my dad in Bible studies. I want my dad to. How can you experience the full goodness of Jesus if you're not seeing people? And that's a healthy thing. Like, my dad's not going to be healthy by never seeing a soul. And so, when I think about approaching the church that I lead, I think about some of those things. Like, I want the oldest member down to the youngest engaged, not in some, some immature way, but I think it's impossible to be healthy if you're not doing those things. And you're not going to do those things. I mean, so many people. I mean, we have a long history now in our church. I don't think imagine what I'm about to say is unique to the modern day era of discipleship in our lifetime. You read about like James and John wanting to burn down a Samaritan village because they didn't want to welcome Jesus. And I laugh at that passage on one level, not to make light of leadership sins. Jesus turns and rebukes those guys and says, cut that out. Right. Don't do that. That's not how we're talking about people. That's not my approach. But it wasn't like at that moment, Jesus was like, that's it. I'm not using humans. We'll just figure out a way to save the world. Just me and God and the Holy Spirit. He rebuked them. He believed that people were going to have to develop.
That's right.
I mean, even the Matthew 28, you think about that. And Matthew 20 says, go make disciples of all nations. But years were going by where they were only converting Jews. And then Acts 15 comes and they're having this huge crisis. And you kind of wonder, at any one point, God could have like inserted himself that, hey, in Matthew 28, what I meant that not just Jews, and they don't have to just eat the kosher foods and stop that,
Right.
But he didn't. They were having to figure it out through the Holy Spirit and through trusting each other. And I think about our own church history, specifically in this area of growth, there were hurts done, but we have to forgive each other.
That's right.
We have to ask for forgiveness. We have to have humility, and there's no moving forward without mercy. But that's part of health. And there's no way to like move to the next, which growth would be one of them, if we can't do that with each other.
Yeah.
And you kind of think some people might be stuck in different eras of that. Some church leaders might be, some memberships of churches might be, leadership teams. How do elders and evangelists work together? It's partly why I want to host a conference, because we want to be able to talk about these things.
Exactly.
We've got to be able to move forward, and there's a way to.
I agree. I think it's a great idea. Who's the conference for? Like, who's your target audience? Is this just for church leaders? Is this for disciples? Is it for big churches, small churches? Who do you want to show up?
I think it's for leaders, anybody who's a part of a leadership team. If you're an elder, if you're a teacher, if you're an evangelist, if you're a pulpit preacher, if you're a campus minister, this is for you. There's going to be stuff, and I think there'll be pertinent stuff for all of you if you're an aspiring church leader, and there's going to be whole classes. I mean, we have a couple of brothers from Australia, a couple of folks from Australia on the call, and most of the Australian churches are growing. It's exciting. They're so supportive.
Right.
They've been Dave Bliley and Megan. They're just so amazing. But most of the churches are small churches, and so they brought their hand up in the this isn't a conference for the whatever 12 churches that are over 1,500 in our movement or however many it is. I don't even know. Probably not even 12. But no. This is for small churches, big churches, and people that would be on leadership teams of those churches. This is a leadership conference.
Okay.
And so it is. But, I'm telling my campus ministers, campus interns.
What if someone
leadership team members
on mission or wants to do missionary work or lead to small groups, got big dreams? Should they come?
I think people are going to be, I'm hoping, not to, you say anything and it can be shot at it these days. But the first few conferences I went to, you kind of felt like, there was also this component where you felt like you had your name tag and then the church you led and the percentage of growth, it was like, and I think it's really hurt us. I actually think that spirit is working against growth.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that spirit's working against growth. And this isn't about competition. This is about being for one another. This is about helping one another. No, I remember back in the day, like 2006, 2007, Tom Brown had called a bunch of us like surviving campus ministers who were 30 years old. I just happened to be one of them. And he called us all into a room. It was kind of post 2003 crisis and all the stuff that went on there. And a lot of people went out of the ministry. Really, campus ministry was on its back in the U.S. And so Tom, being who he was, which is just a glorious, warrior, mentor, sage guy, called like 10 of us into a room from all over the country, from LA to Boston to New York and the Southeast and Texas and Seattle and Chicago, the Midwest. It was all these guys. It was like 10 of us that got in a room. And it almost felt like I remember all those guys from the conferences. They were my competitors, It's crazy. But at that hour, you kind of felt like we were wrestling for the soul of our church. Right. All of us were in our own various spaces. And you came together and God stomped out all that competition and went, for me to win the church in Boston to campus ministry, it helps me that John Markowski in LA was killing it and a great example that you felt that. Like you kind of were like, we're for each other, and humans are going to struggle with those kind of things, especially when we're trying to grow and we're trying to dream, we're trying to go for it. But I actually think competition's not what we're after. And so that those weren't great components of our conferences that were on growth in the past, but there was a feeling at those conferences. You just felt lifted. You just felt like you weren't coming to debate. You were coming in looking to learn. Yeah. We were all there, or a lot of us were there trying to figure out how to do this, and that we got to listen to some guy on the stage just preaching the word on something he was passionate about. You just felt lifted, and then there was fellowship around those things. It was one of the great unifying experiences.
That's right.
We want that.
Yeah.
That's what we want this to feel like.
That's awesome. For for a church leader or a leadership group, eldership, whoever who's listening to this or watching it, they're feeling bad. Their church is plateaued, stuck. You mentioned the Boston church had plateaued for a couple decades. They're hesitant. They're like, I don't know. I don't want to be looked down to. I don't want to be talked down to. Why should they come?
Because the gospel's spread is possible in their church. I mean, the Boston church has plateaued 10 different times. I'm sure we will again. I mean, I'm sure we'll get, we had a great year last year. This is a new year, and already there's so many things that come up. But the idea of trying to do what we're doing, spread the gospel in this dark world alone.
Yeah.
Alone, in isolation, surrounded by people, you're never going to do it. I mean, if that's what you're committed to, you're not going to grow. I mean, part of being healthy is being able to hear from others.
Yeah.
And to be able to see what others are doing. And I think there's so many that have been wounded from negative experiences in that space. I probably would say that's not what this conference is going to be. We're not going to be beating each other up. We're going to be lifting each other up. But we want to come in wanting to learn because it's possible.
Yeah.
Your church can see breakthroughs. If you don't believe that, find faith. God is here. God is real. And, churches go, it's tough to read any of the epistles of the New Testament and there's a couple of them that really seem like they were really doing great but most of them, some of them are a mixed bag. Some of them Paul's just trying to keep with him, not turn away from him. It's like, and so I know we're all over the map, but we got to get beyond, it's what I was saying earlier about, 1 Corinthians 3, but Galatians 5 is another scripture that, I memorized last year. It just says if we bite and devour each other, watch out or you're going to be destroyed by each other. And we had a lot of that. And maybe we have a lot of that in certain spaces, but that's not what this conference is going to be. This is going to be a place to talk about dreaming and going for it and try to get better at this thing while holding each other up and trying to figure it out and coming together.
Yeah, that's great. I was just talking to Doug Jacoby a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and that's one thing he shared is just a lot of backbiting, a lot of talking about other people in different parts of the world that is really damaging. And I do agree. I think coming together, it scares away the boogeyman. It just removes the fears. It humanizes everybody. You get to talk face to face. It really does build unity. So I think that's fantastic. Let me just ask you some more details. Where's it going to be held? What's the venue?
It's going to be in a hotel in Waltham.
Okay.
To host a conference right in downtown Boston. So Waltham is just outside of Boston.
So suburb of Boston.
Suburb of Boston, right on the pike.
How many people are you expecting? How many people currently registered?
We've got about 200 registered, and we're hoping for 500 or 600 people.
Okay.
So there's quite a bit of work. Now, we haven't registered our people in Boston, and I don't think New England's registered yet. But no. We're praying and hoping for about 600 plus.
How much is the registration? How much is it going to cost?
$300 per person to register. So about 600 for a couple, plus the hotel.
Okay. So they're going to budget it. We're talking a couple $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah. Maybe $1,000 for, a couple. It's 4 nights at the hotel. It's a pretty low rate.
So, and the dates are?
April 23rd to 26th.
That's a Thursday through Sunday?
That's a Thursday through Sunday. So, the conference is actually Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Friday night, we're all going to go down to a Boston Harbor cruise. We're going to be together, eating in a big fellowship situation. And then on Sunday, we'll have our downtown worship. So it's not actually, it is part of the conference, but it's not exactly. We're going to leave the hotel and we'll be in downtown Boston, worshiping with the downtown region where you worship and lead with Stuart. And, the campus will be down there. It'll be a great thing to see. So we're thinking on Sunday morning, it won't be the whole Boston church together, but it'll be probably about 1,000 people upstairs. And then maybe we'll have a Spanish service right downstairs.
Awesome.
And so it'll probably be about 1,500 disciples in attendance. It'll be super awesome.
How are you going to know this was a total success? Like when you look back after this conference on that Sunday evening, what do you want to experience? What are you looking for? How will you know, boy, that was amazing. That's exactly what I had hoped for.
That's a great question. That's a hard question. I would probably say, the putting this conversation growth, the spreading of the gospel. We were down at the Broward meetings, and it was an awesome time. Actually, the Broward meetings were the delegates and the service teams met, and I was down there. I'm not on those teams, but I was coming to visit. I was coming to promote the conference, and it was an awesome time. But our churches are shrinking. We've actually shrunk, and I think trust has grown, and we're not where we were 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And I think that, and I really celebrate that. And I think there's great work being done by the service chairs and the delegates, but that's not really, our current governance structure is not really a momentum building structure. If we're looking at kind of, and we've kind of cut that loose to the families of churches, but I think the families of churches are having trouble figuring that out. I'm hoping that we can get the spreading of the gospel conversation back into the vernacular, the safe conversation, the inspired conversation of our churches again, so we can start talking about it in a safe way so that we can start working together and see the gospel move in that other direction, see our church start to grow again. But to me, the simple is if we could leave and people felt like, wow, I want to start growing again. I feel safer talking about it again. Let's take that out of the closet and put that on the table again, on the forefront. If we could get that done, I don't think that fixes everything, but to me, to have a conference where we're talking again about it and to leave being able to go, I can talk about it. It's probably my goal. Maybe that's too short-sighted a goal. But that would be inspiring to me.
I think it's a fantastic goal. And it's one of the reasons why I came to Boston is I wanted to figure out how did a large church that's so set in its culture, it's 50 years old, that's plateaued for a long periods, really locked into a certain size. How did it restart its growth? How does that happen? Because leading many small churches, it's tough enough in a small church that's old. I mean, there's a lifespan. It kind of grows initially and then it plateaus and then it, they hang on for a long time, but it gradually dies out. And I would love to see all the small churches and all the churches. I mean, but most of the churches in across the country and around the world are smaller. To be able to take something and go, okay, I can get my church growing again. I go, that would love it. And for our short time here in Boston, however long we're here, that's what I hope to take away, to learn from you and from others like you. Go, how could I bring revival to the churches? When you think about your long-term vision for the kingdom, and in particular, our family of churches, where would you like to see us in 10 years or 20 years?
Working together better than what we are now. I think it feels like there's a lot of boogeymen, there's a lot of skeletons, and there's a lot of fear. And the experience of planning a conference and putting your hand up to host conference has been radically encouraging. It's been very, very encouraging. I mean, the Boston church, I want to come on the podcast, partly just, I want to get the word out. It's not been easy to get the word out. I mean, even some of our old email lists that you try to contact, it's not quite there. So that's why this is so wonderful. But the Boston Church has been calling church leaders all around the world just to let people know we're having this. We'd love to have you there. That's been a radically encouraging experience for the most part. There's also people that are calling and afraid or, who do you guys think you are? They're hosting a conference. There's that too, but it's much smaller, but my vision would be that we start working together again. There's nobody that's going to come into your church. And that might be a weird thing to say, but they're always going to come into your church to fire you. There's no, but that doesn't exist. We are in many ways autonomous churches now.
Right.
Which I don't know another way to do it. I'm not trying to push another way to do it. What I'm hoping for is increased trust, increased humility, the faith that says, I want to see this move. I can see this move in my home situation. I think, the Boston church is an interesting laboratory on one level because we're 8 different regions, which means we were 3 years ago, we were a 2,200 person church, but it was really 8 different churches divided out. So we had regions of 150 with only the husband and wife staff. Then you had other regions that were 300 that included the campus ministry. So a lot more staff. You kind of have this different picture, and we're just talking about progress. But we've seen some of these 150 person region that Rob Novak is leading. It's our SoCo region. It's a major region. It was just Rob and his wife. Now we've got Keenan down there. So there's 3. They've gone from 150 to 200. I mean, they've seen this group of 150 with no help. There's no, even though people, the Boston Church has just got all these resources, and we do. some of our regions, but some of our regions don't. We're deliberate in that way. But he's seen 30 conversions in a year, which is him and his wife and a campus minister and all these kinds of things. Then there's another region, the downtown region, where we kind of load it up because we have 250,000 college students, in the city on the train. And so we bring a boatload of campus ministers down there. We share resources in Boston. So we're able to be strategic in that way, where we don't give to this region, we give a little bit more over here. I think in 2019, across the Boston church, we saw 31 college students become Christians in 2019, before COVID, before any big dramas. This last year, I think we saw like 133 college students become Christians. And this is not the South, this ain't Texas.
Right.
This is like atheist, super anti-conservative value, biblical value kind of New England. But I think if you have faith, and we all have advantages and disadvantages to your situation. Berea was different than Ephesus, which is different than Thessalonica, which is different than Jerusalem, which is different than Antioch. I think that every place kind of has their own advantages and disadvantages. You got to kind of try to maximize what you have the advantages and try to guard against. But I think if you approach it that way, you could see progress. And then as faith grows, you could see explosion. You can see breakthrough. So I'm hoping we get to increase our faith at the conference and talk, but people can see that, this is being talked about and done, but not an attack.
Yeah, I love that. I just love it. If a person's interested, they want to go, where do they register? Where do they find out about it?
You can go to the Boston Church. Our website will have a link right to it.
Boston.
What is it? Good question.
BostonChurch.org.
That's it, I think.
Okay, great. So they can find out. I'll put the information in.
We've got a cranking social media web team, but I don't lead it. I'm not leading that. Yeah, BostonChurch.org.
And I heard that Stuart is doing a class on social media.
So Stuart's doing a class on social media. We got we got a bunch of classes, but yes, he'll be doing a class. I'm sure Tony will be speaking about it as well. Part of the real breakthrough in Broward is their presence online.
I look forward to it.
And we obviously in Boston, I think over the last 3 years, we've seen 210 souls converted or something like that met us first online.
That's exciting.
Which is amazing. I'm so excited about that. I'm also excited that probably accounts for less than a fifth of our conversions over that time. People getting converted the old-fashioned way, being evangelized, that we're doing both of those things. And I think we want to do that. That's kind of what I mean by advantages and disadvantages. We got to try new things and do new things while being good at the sort of the Bible bedrock things. And if you can put those together.
That's exciting. I look forward to having an episode with you, and I want to break down how you took the church from when it was plateaued, flattened out in its growth, leveled out, and how you did it step by step, just kind of working through year by year. I'd really like to talk to you about that so that other people, including me, of course, could really learn, how can you get a church revived? How can you get a church in a growth direction that's been stuck for a long time? So please put that on your radar.
No, I'd love it. And I feel obligated and just in my conscience to say, it's an interesting thing. We have a 15-person, we saw 4 new elders appointed last year. And I think that brought our number to 15 or 16 elders. You're not doing that in a year. You're not getting that done. If you're some church that doesn't have that. And so I do think, there's no substitute for time. God's got to move over time to get us healthier, to make progress. There's an old book. It's a business book called Good to Great. It kind of talks about pushing this 5,000-pound flywheel and one man pushing this and you don't even budget. But if you could, in actuality, put the same effort in, second by second, minute by minute, over a long period of time without getting tired, you might see it start to budge. And then if you keep pushing at that same rate, it starts to turn. That's the book describes that, and then you finally get one rotation after pushing. And then if you keep pushing at the same length, you start getting more rotation. And then if you keep doing it, it moves. And at some point, if you keep pushing, the momentum of the wheel, the weight of the wheel works in your favor. And then all of a sudden, poof, now it's going fast, real fast. And if at any one point you were to say, what push moved it to that? And that's the point of this book. It says it's almost a silly question. And I think that about building, where I don't want to sit here and say, because so much good work was being done for so long, over so much time, to position the Boston Church in 2020, coming out of COVID with the eldership and the mature staff and the young, and even the training of me, there was a lot that went in. So I don't think it was something that went on in 2020. I think the work that was done before, all of it contributes That being said, if you're doing the wrong things over time, if you're putting the wrong choices together, if you're training your staff in the wrong ways, if you're prioritizing the wrong things over time, then you're never going to get that moving. And so that's what I feel sort of like passionate. Let's talk about the right things. Paul says that in 1 Corinthians 3, he says you can build with, gold, silver, and costly stones, or wood, hay, and straw, and that our work will be shown for what it is over time.
Yeah.
And so we want to talk about some of those things as kind of we see it. But that would be a great podcast. I'm happy to describe what we've been doing, but I also feel humbled to the fact that, these are difficult things, and we all stand on the shoulders of those before us. We want to make good choices now moving forward so that we can be heading in the right direction and make good progress.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and all the best with your conference. Thanks for joining us today. My goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no-regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.